Hello, 20,000 troops pushed to fools to fight east is not a routine movement. It is the kind of signal that changes the atmosphere of an entire region before a single shot is fired. What makes this heaver is not just the number. It is the mix of platforms, paratroopers moving by Keeson and Morans lifted for by heavy helicopters, and a B-52 reportedly configured for a deep strike mission inside iron. That combination carries one message above all others. This is not just posture, this is pressure with Operation Chest. And the deeper concern is what happens when deterrence starts to look almost indistinguishable from the opening shape of war. The sequences drive here moves with alarming speed. Soldiers are pulled from assembly areas, their packs loaded with the basic logic of immediate deployment, clothing, absorbent sure, rations, first aid, essentials for an unknown length of time. That matters because uncertainty is part of the pressure. Troops told they are heading into the Middle East for an undetermined period are not being framed for a symbolic visit. They are being prepared for an environment where duration, escalation, and mission expansion are all left open. Plots imply this is no longer a minor detail. Then the picture sharpens. Airborne force are not waiting for the slower buck of conventional movement. Paratroopers parachutes, carry weapons in soft cases and move directly towards even aircraft with rams down. That is a very specific image. It suggests a force designed to arrive first, secure ground first, and create facts on the terrain before heavy formations complete their transit. Whenever news is placed the far forward in the narrative, the real question is no longer whether this is serious. The question becomes what exactly they're preparing to say, secure a dinner. And then cause the most explosive element in the account. A B-52 is loaded with 2,000-pound bombs for what is described as a mission dip inside Iran. If publicly available information ever points in that direction, the significance is enormous, not because heavy bombers are usual in American power procession, but because once a strategic bomber enters the frame with that kind of pellet, the line between warning and execution becomes dangerously thin. This is where commentary has to stay disciplined. The imagery is vivid, but official verification would still matter. A dramatic deployment story is not the same thing as a confirmed commander. Still, even as an operational scenario, the signal is unmistakable. The problem is that this is only the surface. The transcripts does not stop with long-range air power. It expands outward into a layered movement system, Marines launching from a carrier deck in achieve spans at personal thinkots, shuttling personnel in repeated short halves, personal flyers, wardlers, rolling off a referral effortos after the camps, aviging in tasting, tuning tains, ammunition staffers. B-52s stance is at Habstemasitters death to wear, and preparing a fort camp near the Iranian border. That level of detail matters because it shifts the image from spectacle to fresher. Wars do not begin only with explosions. They begin with logistics, with positioning, with supply, with common links, with the dull, methodical work that makes violence sustainable. And that is what gives this account its real weight. Not the headline number alone, but the sense of a force being assembled in layers: air, ground, support, strike, transport, and reinforcement. In other words, the surface is not the whole story. The larger issue now is whether this kind of build-up is meant to prevent a wider confrontation, or whether it increases the chance of one by making every actor in the region really see move in this counter. But that is still not the main issue. The heaviest part may be the contradiction buried inside the logic of deterrence itself. FSA says as moving force to prevent escalation, but the visible shape of that movement includes airborne assertion, strategic bombing capacity, helicopter, bombing enforcement, enforcement, and camp construction near a live flashpoint. Every rival watching is forced to calculate under maximum stress. That is where accidents become strategy, and strategy starts to resemble a trap. Because ON's troops are not just arriving but entrenching. ON's ammunition is being distributed and communications networks are being established as the message shifts from temporary warning to potent staying for and staying power change the psychology of the other. The words used around such deployments matter. Phrase about unlimited ammunition, the greatest equipment, or decimating an adversary are not neutral language. Pays on a calm region already primed for miscalculation. They harden expectations. They tell allies to brace, adversaries to prepare. In populations across the surrounding states that the margin for error may be causing. This is where the situation becomes more dangerous than the visuals alone suggest. Not because every movement automatically means war, but because every movement now carries a second meaning. A cargo aircraft used not just for troops. It signals readiness. A bomber does not just fly. It creates the possibility of preemption, retaliation, or counter-retaliation. A forward cam is not just a cam. It is a statement that the operation may not end quickly. More importantly, this exposes a much larger layer underneath. The Gulf around Hormuz is not just a map label. It is one of the most sensitive energy choke points on Earth. Anything that raises the probability of direct confrontation near the corridor does not stay local for long. It pushes into shipping risk, oil prices, insurance costs, military alert levels, allied diplomacy, and the domestic politics of every government that suddenly has to explain whether it is prepared for a wider shock. This is why a deployment story like this cannot be treated as a narrow tactical event. The consequences spread far beyond the runway, the carrier deck, or the drop zone. And there is another pressure point here that should not be ignored. The transcript builds a powerful image of speed and coordination, but speed cuts both ways. The faster forces assemble, the less time political leaders have to de-escalate once public expectations have been raised. Once units are in motion, once aircraft are loaded, once crews are strapped in and camps are being built, backing away can begin to look like weakness rather than discipline. That is one of the oldest dangers in crisis behavior. Military preparation creates this momentum, and momentum has a way of shrinking the space for careful judgment. Pots imply the real concern lies in the consequence behind it. If this is intended as a warning, it is a warning delivered in a form that could be read as imminent action. If it is intended as preparation only, it's still respiration rations and make preparation and distinguishing full provocation. And if even part of this picture reflects real operational thinking, then the unresolved question is no longer whether the region part of this picture. It clearly is. The unresolved question is whether anyone still controls the pace of what comes next, or whether the machinery now visible has already started pulling events faster than diplomacy can contend. And that is where the story becomes impossible to dismiss. When troops, bombers, helicopters, and forward positions begin to align around one of the most volatile corridors on Earth, the Zanger is no longer theoretical. The risk is that one show of force becomes one irreversible step. What matters now is not just what has moved, but who still has the power to stop this from crossing the final line. Stay close to this story, watch every signal, and judge every development carefully, because the next move may decide whether this remains pressure or turns into something far harder to contain.